The worst horror movie I ever saw was fucking great.
Hello and welcome to This May Hurt a Bit. My name is James Strayer and this is
John C. Myers.
And we are a horror franchise podcast discussing each film in popular and not so popular horror franchises. And today we are talking about Psycho from 1960. So John, as we mentioned last time, we are going from Saw 9 to Psycho, the absolute masterpiece, considered by many to be one of the greatest films of all time. Done by one of the greatest directors of all time. What are we doing here? What
What a drop off.
Yeah, exactly.
Drop off from Chris Rock and Big Boss Man.
Yeah.
It has felt very daunting to do this.
100%.
I think simply because so much has been written about it and so much has been said about it. And it's an amazing movie.
Yes.
It should be talked about. But it also is just a gateway for us to get to the sequels.
I mean, that's the thing. I was feeling a little bit intimidated as well, just because part of the format, and like I like to believe that we don't rip on movies too much, but it is kind of fun to goof around while talking about Wishmaster, you know? Yeah. But Psycho demands a certain sort of reverence that may or may not make for good podcasting, you know? Like I also don't want to be, Chris Farley in SNL just being like, hey, you remember that part?
Yeah.
That was good.
That was cool.
Yeah, you were great.
I am kind of fascinated though, as we get into it though, that like how younger people, like their exposure to this movie, because it was such sort of an ingrained bit of popular culture.
Yeah.
For a while, like, is it the same now? Like, I can think of different like references in cartoons and other stuff I saw, that
oh, for sure
kind of thing. I wonder if it's to the point now. When I saw Taxi Driver when I was in high school, I was watching with a friend of mine, and he was like, I knew he was going to do the "Are you talking to me?" thing. I'm like, yeah, that's what this is from. Yeah, he had no idea. He just knew that,
Sure.
So because there's part of me that wonders how this holds up with that, because this is particularly coming from Saw, is that this is so much more of a minimalist movie. Yeah. Even though it's Hitchcock or whatever, like it's small. He shot it with a TV crew.
TV crew, yeah.
Which I honestly had no idea it was as late in his career as it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but to kind of go from this like extreme boom boom to this, does it still hold the same impact? And I would argue it does, because it's amazingly well made. Like I still am riveted by it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about how this plays based on the idea that whether it be this in the shower scene, whether it be the Exorcist head turn and pea soup vomit scene, like there are certain older horror movies that just get into the zeitgeist, and you see the SNL thing, you see the Simpsons gag, etc., before you see the film. And does that take away from the film at this point? And I mean, for Christ's sake, I remember, I think there's a Spuds MacKenzie commercial where he's in the shower or something like that. I think
there was there was like a Universal Studios tie-in or something, or like some sort of
the coolest little
totally
bulldog or whatever kind of dog he was, beer dog, whatever. Kids in the audience looked that up. Everybody had a Spuds MacKenzie poster at one point.
Kids learn to drink from Spuds MacKenzie,
right? But yeah, it's just like it is interesting. And when I was going into this, like I think the last time I watched this I know it was in the theater, and it was either at Hollywood or the Laurelhurst Theater here in Portland. But I remember loving it on the big screen. And then, it's not really one that I just throw on very often. There is long stretches, but threw it on, and still great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Podcast
really
over.
It. Yep, that's it.
Yeah. But yeah, like you were saying, like there was also part of me that's just like, I'm very excited to get through this one, to get to the sequels too, because I have no idea where the sequels are going to go. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's some of it too. This is kind of an all-encompassing thing. Like it's a told tale. It's done by the end of it. You're like, okay, well, what happens next? How did you some years later decide like, well, let's revisit this again and again and again? Yeah. So I'm curious how what happens with that?
How you franchise Norman Bates? I have no idea. But
how do you get this goofball to come back?
How does this rank in your Hitchcock preferences? Because I still have a lot of blind spots when it comes to Hitchcock. I've seen a fair amount of his, but not all, for for sure.
I have seen very little, if I'm being honest. Like I've seen the big ones, you know, your Vertigos, your North by Northwest, Strangers on a Train.
Yep. Birds.
Actually, never seen The Birds.
Aha. That's my favorite Hitchcock is The Birds.
There's just a ton. And so this made me go, oh, yeah, I need to do that.
Yeah.
I need to watch a lot more Hitchcock movies.
Some of them do feel like homework. I saw at the Overlook Film Festival, they were playing The Lodger. I remember it was a David Bowie reference right there. But
that's an early one for him, isn't it?
His third film, 1927. Which is just like there were people alive in 1927. I guess,
weirdly enough.
Yeah,
and then 100 years later, who knows?
Yeah, right. It's astounding to me that he was making films in 1927, and then Psycho was 1960. So that's over 30 years later, still cranking them out.
Starring Jamie Lee Curtis's mom.
Yes, exactly. Janet Leigh.
Okay, yeah, that kind of made me feel old as well.
Right.
Yeah. So there's still a lot that I haven't seen.
Yeah, and this is still probably later in his career. Like he kept making films up to like 74, I believe, and he didn't turn them out with as much frequency as he used to. But the big interesting thing about Psycho for me, as far as just like getting into why he made it, was that he did Vertigo and North by Northwest, which were varying, like they were definitely hits, but he was tired of that success and he just wanted to do something different. And he was looking at people like, I don't know if Herschel Gordon Lewis was like on his way quite yet, but he was looking at like the schlock people who were just churning out movies and making a giant profit for them. And I don't think it was money based, but it was partially that. But he was also just like, let's show you what an auteur can do with B grade stuff. So it's kind of like your Dan O'Bannon / Ridley Scott giving you Alien. Like how do you take kind of a B grade script and make it a masterpiece? And that's kind of what he was looking for in Psycho.
Well, and to hear him talk about it too, at least in the Francois Truffaut book, Hitchcock, which is just a bunch of interviews with him and Alfred Hitchcock, is that he routinely talks about how much he enjoys like playing with the audience. And that seems like that was sort of the goal with this whole thing. Oh, yeah. The Psycho has a very interesting construction, and the game with the audience was fascinating. I was directing the viewers. You might say I was playing them like an organ. And it's true. I mean, not only is there, the famous 45 minutes in twist, but just the way that your alliances, so to speak, are shifting through the movie, just your the way you view the characters, stuff like that. It's fascinating how it's done because it's not very overt, like it's very subtle compared to some of the stuff. And I couldn't help but think about some more recent filmmakers, particularly coming off of Saw, where every movie ends with this wave of twists, this wave of exposition and it's like that, and how understated so much of this stuff is and how much it doesn't matter. He doesn't necessarily want you to know that he's doing it, which I like as an approach much better than say your Ryan Johnson's or whatever.
Yeah, there you go. He wanted so desperately to not only, manipulate everybody, but like really take him for a ride as kind of a showman. So by this point, he was definitely the man, Alfred Hitchcock, by this point. What was so fun to me to read about was I love those big kind of like William Castle type of personalities who are just so into the theater going experience. And Hitchcock, for Psycho, he wanted to protect the big twist. He wanted to protect the ending so badly that he was the first person to say, basically, you arrive a minute late and you're not getting in. And that was something that theater exhibitors had never done before. And to have that kind of power is fascinating on itself. But of course, he had to inject himself into it. So when you would go stand in line for Psycho in 1960, his voice would come booming out of speakers in the lobby and say that you will not be allowed in if you're late. And
that's awesome.
He was really drumming up all of the publicity that got him. Also, because he self-financed this film, because none of the studios would finance it. So he was just like, I got to get butts in seats and get the word spread about this thing.
Which is even funnier. And I'll stop comparing it to the Saw movies, but it's on my mind. But it's like the taboo breaking that was happening in this movie.
Oh my God.
He showed a toilet.
Yes.
And then we came off a movie where a guy's fingers just got ripped off. And it's like, you can't show a toilet on the TV screen.
You come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
Yes, this film does show the first toilet on screen.
Yeah, so give it up. Give it up for the first toilet.
And
you know what's sick? No one even remembers that toilet's name. It's terrible.
You know what? Yeah.
This is what the strike's about.
I was just going to say that, yes. These days, you just scan a toilet into a computer and they can just line your movies with toilets.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. This show does completely support the strikes, if that was not
absolutely.
Apparent. Yes. But yeah, like, I love the fact that he really did have to go to the censor board and explain why it was so necessary to show a toilet. You know, it was because a very specific piece of evidence was attempted to be flushed down the toilet and it didn't work. So also bad pipes at the Bates Motel. But so
get ready for that Yelp review.
Shower, great. Not so much the toilet. But no, it's like, I love that he was even 2 steps ahead of the censor board before he had even shot the film, knowing that he was going to have a fight over a toilet.
Among other things. But
yeah, exactly.
For this show, it's the toilet. That's what we're going to focus on for the next hour.
Among stabbings, nudity, lingerie, big buff dudes with their shirts off, all that kind of stuff. I love the 60s era of American history. I know it, for the tumult, for the time changing, for the government intrigue and all that kind of stuff too. But like, it's truly the beginning of everything from birth control in the Playboy Mansion to people like wanting to see something on screen that wasn't a giant bug that was also a horror movie. You know, like all these shifts in zeitgeist, whether it be social constructs to before this, it was mad monster movies, and now it's a literal slasher getting you in the shower, which is way scarier. Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff underlying this whole movie. As simple as the movie is in comparison to some of this other stuff that we've seen, like it is very layered with stuff, and that's why there has been so much analytical film theory stuff about it.
Yes. And some of that, I guess you could say, as with any film theory type of stuff, I can take or leave it. Like if it makes me excited, then I'm just like, oh, that's a good idea. But I can just as easily be like, he was probably just trying to rush to make his day that day. And like, it was a happy coincidence occasionally,
Yeah, there's some stuff that's interesting for that. Like I said, the way he talks about it is fascinating. Like particularly when, and we can get into it when the Arbogast scene, Arbogast. I love the way the sheriff says it.
Arbogast.
That the way he describes doing it is much more practical, like the camera move or like I'm sorry, it's more specific when Norman is going to take his mother back down to the basement to the fruit cellar.
Oh yes.
It's much more practical in why he chose to do it, but I you could probably do some serious readings into that or whatever, and that's cool. That's great. I mean, that's what art is supposed to do.
Exactly.
But I do like just reading that he's like, no, I just needed to do this.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's thought behind it. It's not just like what.
So to jump in, the first thing that I thought when I turned this movie on just made me laugh right out of the gate, because you fire up the Blu-ray, the music starts, and I thought, oh, the Reanimator theme. But that's because... and that's because Richard Band, Charles Band's brother, who did the music for Reanimator and a lot of Charles Band movies, was, I wouldn't say ripping off, but he was extremely going for the Psycho. So much so that now, because I watch Reanimator far more often than I watch Psycho, because it's just like way more entertaining in a lot of ways, I just know the music more as a Reanimator theme at this point now. So immediately I was like, oh, Psycho, Reanimator, great, I'm ready. And add to that, the titles by Saul Bass are the opening is already great.
Admittedly, it's kind of the same thing, because when it hits the more like sort of sweeping strings, I think of the Busta Rhymes song "Give Me Some More," because I remember that like lifted heavily from that.
Yes, right. God,
I'm just kind of like bopping my head to it. I'm like, Psycho.
Janet Leigh.
Bust a bus. Yeah.
Right. So we opened in Phoenix, Arizona, December 11th. The reason why he put up these title cards is because he had a B team go out and shoot B-roll in Phoenix, Arizona that day. And they showed up and there was a bunch of Christmas decorations around, and the film came back and he was like, ah, shit, how are we going to explain this away? the man had to stay one step ahead of the audience, so he just decided, guess it's December. So that's cute.
And it's 2:43 to show how salacious this couple is being, because instead of having a normal person lunch break, they're rutting in a hotel.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what time you take your lunch break, but it's usually around 11:30 a.m. for me. So this is insane.
2 o'clock.
I would be worthless at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, two lovers are illicitly meeting in the hotel room. We see that they haven't even touched their meals, so her sandwich is still wrapped up, which is kind of a cute little detail. And just right off the bat, Duder is a sculpted man, Sam, here, wide-shouldered man, and he's laying in bed with Marion, who is in, for the time, rather risque lingerie, and this is one of the first battles that Hitch had to have, is just like, this sequence was way too scandalous for the time. But so, yeah, they're just meeting up as lovers on lunch breaks. He's from California, I believe, flies in to meet up with Marion sometimes. She wants like a normal lifestyle. I love the little bit about,
Oh, we can see each other. We can even have dinner. But respectably. In my house, with my mother's picture on the mantle, and my sister helping me broil a big steak for 3.
And then he's just like, well, after steaks, can we turn the picture on the mantle around? You dirty dog, Sam.
It's interesting how later, when she meets Norman, she has that experience, but it's this like weird version of it. It's this wrong version of it.
Yes. They're eating sandwiches.
Yeah. And that uncanniness, I think, permeates this film.
Yes.
As her journey continues, as it starts escalating, that I love.
Yes.
Makes this whole thing creepy and interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it goes without saying that watching this movie multiple times rewards you.
Oh, absolutely.
Like every time you watch it, you pick up on something. I watched it about 2.5 times before we recorded this, and then some like documentary footage and stuff. And like, I absolutely picked up on more stuff each time I watched it. So
I got obsessed with the shot of him when Arbogast is showing him the ledger, and he like that one shot of him like leaning in. I think I watched that like 45 times.
I have a big thing in my notes about that. Like that was, I don't want to call it my favorite shot in the movie because that's a little ridiculous and psycho, but it's so strange the way that thing is framed. Oh,
it's great.
It's so tense. So Sam has to fly out, and so she rushes back to where she's supposed to be at work that day, and right there we get Hitchcock's cameo of him standing outside in a cowboy hat on the street. He always has to inject himself, and that's a fun game with Hitchcock movies. Marion's talking to her coworker, and this guy that looks like Bill Murray's brother, I feel like, and kind of talks like him. Yeah, what's his name? Yeah,
kind of does have a Brian Doyle Murray
Brian
vibe
Doyle Murray.
Like, not the voice for sure. But,
yeah, that's it. Yeah. But just his whole presentation is kind of Brian Doyle Murray type of thing. And he's like, I guess he's like an oil man or something like that. But he is just throwing around his money and just showing off what he's
like an odd combo of Brian Doyle Murray and Pete Martell.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
He's got a little Jack Nance in him.
Yeah, there you go.
That is
the sweet type of Jack Nance.
Yes.
So he's trying to he's just sort of bragging that his daughter is getting married tomorrow, and he's gonna buy her a house, and he's got $40,000 that he's gonna buy her this house with in cash that he starts flashing around, and there's a little bit of a to-do about what he can do with his own money as he like completely flirts / maybe sexually harasses Marion right there at her desk.
Yeah. There's a lot of like it's flirting and also just like showing off. Like, man, I am so rich. Yeah. It's such a pain sometimes. Right.
Yeah.
And this actually is the real protagonist of the movie, because the movie ultimately becomes about the horrifying loss of money from a rich person, and then at the end he gets it back.
So, there you go. Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh, right.
I mean, spoiler alert, but I just want to put that out there so you're not freaked out through the whole podcast, worried that a rich guy might not get his money.
Might be down 40 large.
Might be down 40 large. Yeah.
Yeah. So the oil baron and the boss go off and have a little bit of whiskey just to celebrate business deals, capital B, capital D. Marion places the $40K in her purse, and but the boss smartly says, "I don't want that shit in the office over the weekend, please. Like not our responsibility. Take that to the bank, please."
That is so much money to just have lying around.
Yeah,
and I love that whole office scene with Patricia Hitchcock as as the coworker, that she's leaving this. Marion and Sam have this whole thing, this whole back and forth. And it's great. Like the blocking is great. They're sort of a quiet verbal battle of, we got to stop meeting like this. Let's make this official. Like, let's have this happen. And Sam's like, I can't. I owe money. I live in the back of a hardware store. I owe money because of my dad. I had all these debts. I owe ex-wife. Oh, I can't give you the life that you want.
Yeah.
Like it's not necessarily a like, hey baby, you knew what this was when you got into it. It's like, I can't make this work for you. And then she's like, I don't care. It doesn't have to be that. Let's just, and so like there's this back and forth. And so when she comes back to the office and she's met with this drudgery of her awful coworker, played by Alfred Hitchcock, who's just like really self-focused and just talking about her own life, whatever. And then this asshole comes in and is like, I got a bunch of money and I'm a big dumbass.
Yeah.
And,
You know what I do about unhappiness? I buy it off. Are you unhappy?
so she's like, I could make this life for us.
Yes.
I could get away from all this because of what a bore this guy is.
Yeah.
You as the viewer are like, yeah, do it. Take the money. This guy sucks.
Yeah.
Take the money.
Right.
Which is, that's a crime.
Yeah.
So like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's commit crimes.
Yeah.
In the name of love for Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So like her wheels start turning immediately about this. And now we see Marion in her bedroom and she keeps glancing at the envelope full of cash. And I read a book called Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho. And there is a fun anecdote like every other page on that that I won't I just suggest you read it because we'll be here for 9 hours if I relate everything that I thought was interesting there. But even in this, like whether corny or not, but Hitchcock expressly put Janet Leigh in black lingerie in this scene because this is the scene where she decides that she's going to make this bad decision. So she's kind of like vampy, like walking around back and forth a little bit. And
you got to put on your bad girl bra
exactly
to get this to happen. Yeah.
Absolutely. Don't you? When you're making hard decisions, you put on your bad girl bra.
I got to put on my bad girl bra.
Yep.
It's unflattering, but it makes me feel powerful.
There you go. Hey, whatever works, man.
Yeah.
She hops in the car and she's kind of trying to hightail it out of town until she sees her boss and Tom, the oil man, crossing the street, and they both look right at her.
And of course, talk about just other pop culture and informing stuff. My first thought is Pulp Fiction.
Right.
Just gun it. Take it down.
Yes. Forgot about that.
Yeah. She said, oh, hey, what's up? No, just going to the bank.
Yeah,
just don't worry about it.
Doing that thing you told me to do. For sure. Wink.
And I like the way, like in that scene, the way that before that, where she leaves work because she's like, I'm gonna go home. Gonna spend all weekend in bed, and you see her at home, just like changing her ring, and then the camera goes down to the $40,000, and then pans up to the suitcase.
Yes,
like that sort of efficiency of like you're like, yep, I know what's going on.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
She doesn't have to go like, I have an idea. What if, in some sort of like Dune voiceover,
Right. Put your hand in the box and take the money.
Take the money.
I love the idea.
That's the ultimate test. That's the quiz about Saturday. He's like, there's $40,000 in there. Do you pull it out?
Yeah.
Do you take it?
I love the idea of the Jean Gabar being just like, take the fucking money and run. That's it.
I think that's how like you become bank management. Is they make you do that. Right. Like, here's $40,000 in there. Do you take it? You have passed.
Yes, with the three sisters in robes.
It's you can now run the Iron Bank of Bravos or whatever.
Right. She leaves town. It's dark. She can't see. And so in a series of just fantastic shots, I think there's like two big driving sequences with her. It's just like they start wide and then they just get closer and closer and closer to her face each time, which is impressive.
And there's more stuff that happens, but as it happens, like you no longer are seeing fades between scenes to indicate time passing. They're just like cuts, but it's getting darker and it's getting weirder. And this is a big moment for the changeover into the nighttime world, into Norman's world, so to speak. But before that happens, she encounters a cop.
Yes.
I love that in this movie, it thematically, it works in both cases, but I love that Hitchcock's movie is like, oh, is there an oppressive investigating force? then he's got to have a big face, and it's got to be right in the camera. Because when she gets she sleeps on the side of the road,
Yep.
a cop comes by to like check on her, make sure she's okay, and the framing is just this Clancy Brown face,
Yes.
just boom.
Yeah.
You're on her side. She's committed a crime.
Yep.
There's like this oil man is awful, but has not done anything wrong to Marion.
Right.
But she's taken his money and run. And so you're immediately like, oh crap, the fuzz. The cop seems like can tell that something's weird, but it's also just, you're a creepy guy that just woke this woman up on the side of the road.
Yeah.
So they have a terse little exchange, and then she immediately is like, well, I got to ditch this car.
Mm-hmm.
The car dealerships in this era are fascinating to me. And again, I couldn't thinking of other things. The Mystery Science Theater 3000 short Hired, about car salesmen, just like the way they talk about selling cars. Like, we hope you buy your next 10 cars from us. That like, she just goes to the car dealership, and the cop has followed her there. And that him just hanging out behind the scenes, like, love that. It's very tense. Hanging in the air the whole time. And the guy is just ready to wheel and deal her. She's like, whatever, just give me a car. $700 for a car with her trade-in.
Yeah.
With trade-in. But still, like, that's insane.
Yes.
And he's like, he's ready. He's got the grease gun going, but she's like, I don't care. Just give me that. And so he's very thrown by that.
But I love his whole attitude where he's just like, he's so full of like Midwestern quips that I wanted to hang out with him so bad. You know, one of the ones being something to the effect of like, well, do anything you want. And being a woman, you probably will. It's like, what does that mean, dude?
That like, it was like, yo, here we go. First customer is always the worst. Thank you. Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. And so when she's not really like playing along with that, he's very thrown. But then when he gives her the price for the car, and she's like $700, and he's like, oh, now it's a fucking problem. She's like, no, it's not a problem. Here you go. Here's money. He's like, okay. Bye.
Literally cash. 7 $100 bills. Here you go. Doesn't look suspicious, of course.
Yeah, so you have all these men in Marion's life. Sam is this kind of tough but firm, like not overbearing, but like standoffish in the way that like he won't meet her demands or whatever. And then like you have this cop kind of really looming over her. Like I said, this car salesman doing this routine to try to get one over on her, it seems like. So when Norman is introduced, it's really a balm of sorts.
Oh, sure.
He seems so nice compared to everyone else that she's met with.
That's
so far.
True. Yeah.
Even her boss, who's like fine, not necessarily awful, but just But then he's acquiescing to the whims of this awful, this braggart oil man.
Right. Yeah. So she goes to the loving arms of Norman Bates. Here again, she's a bunch of close-ups. She's driving through the night, but this is interesting here because she starts imagining the voices of the people who are accusing her of potentially stealing the money. The boss, the oil man. I do love that the oil man at that point does say,
Hot creeper, she sat there while I dumped it out. Hardly even looked at it. Planning and even flirting with me.
So, but this is the first time in the film that we're hearing disembodied voices, but they're not like voices. It's unclear if these are voices of what's actually happening or of what she's being kind of like a guilty conscious about.
I don't know. I can't for sure say this, but this definitely seems like you were talking earlier about a change from sort of like, big monster bugs to this more sort of like modern horror, is that it does address the more modern thing of being alone and inventing that people are mad at you.
Oh my God.
Just like this. Yeah. This free floating anxiety in her head that she's just like, yeah, that's totally what's happening right now. And then everyone's mad at me. And then granted, it makes sense for the sort of the changes that she decides to make. But I'm like, yeah, no, I've totally done that about, you're just driving along having fictional arguments with nobody.
God, John, you say that like you're mad at me right now. I'm just starting to feel a little self-conscious.
There's a whole separate podcast that's just our internal monologues throughout this whole thing. It's like, well, why did he say that? Well, he must mean this.
He must not like me anymore. But and of course, the more I watch this film, it's, to me, you can't help but parallel these voices in Marion's head to the voice of Mother in Norman's head. That to me, that's an easy observation because there's no other voices going around in there, but they become, I don't want to say they're mirror images of each other or anything like that, but there is a little bit of that, what do you call it?
There's definitely a pairing.
The Infinity or the Mobius or something like that, where they become,
absolutely.
They kind of become each other.
goofball, like I think he's a sociologist, political guy, Slazov Zizek. He's a guy, I don't know if you're familiar, but he talks like this and he's always rubbing his nose and some bizarre things, but he's also a big film nut. And he wrote a book called like The Pervert's Guide to Cinema. And he talks about that a little bit in there and how they are the Mobius. They're kind of like this, not quite an inverse of one another, but they're like the same, like you're on Marion's path long enough, you end up in Norman Bates's world.
Right.
Because just like there's a sort of like reaction to modernity, not modernity, but like the stuff that Marion is going for, the stuff Marion is running away. Like, I want to create this 50s domesticity for myself.
Sure.
And then Norman Bates is like, hi, I had that. It's fucking weird.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Are you sure?
Yeah. So it's this, it's totally this weird sort of inversion of a lot of, and they're paired throughout, like not only in the fact that Hitchcock changed the name from the novel from Mary to Marion. Yeah. But there's mirrors, just like the way they're framed in certain scenes. And absolutely this hearing of voices that like, it's normal to drive and get mad and like think about everyone hating you, but it's not normal to have your mom do it.
Right.
The fictional version of your mom do it.
Yeah. She does kind of like smile towards the end of this shot too, which is like right before she pulls into the Bates Motel, she does give like a smile at the camera, which to me is also mirroring the final shot of the film, or second to final shot of Norman Bates too. But
particularly because it's not like that she's come to some kind of decision.
I was going to say that.
It's almost like she's like, they're going to be so pissed. Yeah. It's going to rule.
It's going to be great.
And eventually, I mean, that eventually sort of becomes guilt. As she talks about it, but in that moment, she's like, I'm getting away with this.
Right,
This is pretty cool.
And there's a motel right there in the rain. Surely nothing bad will happen here. So the rain is pouring down, and we get our first glimpse at the famous Bates Motel. And she looks up. It's a giant house on the hill. It looks awesome. Kind of like there's a hotel of a bunch of like kind of like ranch style cabins almost, and then there's a weird creepy house on the hill right behind the hotel. It's visually very arresting and obviously speaks very much to Norman's sort of state in that here's this business that he's running, this everyday thing, but behind is this looming ever present. In the office we see Norman Bates for the first time, played by Anthony Perkins. And Marion signs herself in as Marie, and Norman takes her to the room, shows her around. He's all charmingly awkward, kind of creepy, but not too bad. He does ask her for dinner, and I can't remember if it's this bit or later on where he said, they say, why don't you come around for dinner and the talks? You want to just hang out with the talks? So thank you, our listeners, for just hanging out while John and I have the talks about all these different movies that we're watching. But
we should do a different podcast where you explain The Birds and the Bees to me. I think that would be that would be a good one too. It's the talk.
That'll be 20 seconds long, so I can get out of there as fast as possible.
I do it. No, neither of us are happy to be here.
Right. Patreon.
They do what with what?
At this point, we do see also an old woman walking in front of the window before we see Norman Bates. I did miss that part. So we get our first shot of Mother kind of like silhouetted, like walking across, which is pretty fantastic. So eventually she agrees to meet him for dinner. She hides the money, and she overhears Norman fighting with his mother up at the house. The mother just starts berating Norman for inviting her up to the house and all that kind of thing. So it is important to know at this point in the film where we do hear a voice of Mother and the voice of Norman Bates arguing after each other.
Which is fascinating. Like, so there are at least two different voices for Mother. Possibly, I thought I read
more.
Three, but I'm seeing like just looking at the IMDb cast list, it just mentions two. They're similar, but they're not the same. And I think that what for when you find out what it is going on with Norman, that it's kind of changing, I think works really well. It's again that sort of like uncanny, like it's off somehow. It kind of keeps you uneasy.
Don't know which mother you're going to get.
Snake eyes.
Yes.
Now keep in mind, like, this is like a half hour into the movie. So I think what this is like an hour 48, something like that. Like this is a good way into the movie. And we have seen some movies before. We've talked about some movies before that's like, oh yeah, and then like nothing has happened. And we're 40 minutes in the movie. And like this has all been set up, but you are just involved. Like you're just wrapped in this journey that she's taken. And Hitchcock, again, quoting from the Hitchcock Truffaut book, the more we go into the details of the girl's journey, the more the audience becomes absorbed in her flight. That's why so much is made of the motorcycle cop and the change of cars. When Anthony Hopkins tells the girl of his life in the motel and they exchange views, you can play upon the girl's problem. But you spend so much time with her on this journey, and like you're totally siding with her. And then when like, oh, so okay, well this hotel guy's kind of awkward and strange, but he's nice enough.
Yeah.
And then so when she's having dinner with him, yeah, that seems harmless. He just seems kind of a lonely weirdo. Then when they do agree to have dinner, this might be my favorite scene in the movie.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So he comes back with a tray of sandwiches, much like the sandwiches in the hotel that we mentioned earlier. And they go into his kind of like, I guess, office behind the main desk, the check-in desk area. And the room is covered in weird paintings and taxidermy, which is so effective.
You know, before now, in all the scenes, it's been very kind of, I don't want to say flat lighting, but it's more just sort of realistic. And at the time, color had already happened. I think this is why I was surprised that this was such late Hitchcock. Because I just kind of, in my brain, I went, oh, they went color, and then they just stayed color. But color was still, like, the news was still in black and white, and a lot of documentaries were still in black and white. So that kind of gave it this air of more sort of quote-unquote realism in that regard. And so it's sort of like this more almost matter-of-fact real-world thing. And then as she's making this journey, as this stuff gets darker, when she gets to the hotel, and particularly this scene, it's all just gothic horror.
Yes, absolutely.
It's all like just big shadows, and like the way that the parlor is lit, like with that owl being underlit, is just creepy.
Yep.
Even though you're brought into this by like this, hey, I'm a little awkward, I'm a little weirdo. It's still just this. Something seems very off here.
Yeah. And again, it's what she wants in a way, because she, like, I'm reminded of the photo of mother, or her mother, the photo of her mother on the mantle that she describes earlier, which she wants to have looking at her while she's eating. Now she's got a taxidermied owl and perhaps other mother up there on the hill.
Watching her from afar or very close.
Very close.
And they're sitting across the room from each other, and it's all... Conversation is just one shots.
Yes. Yeah.
Which oftentimes drives me nuts in movies, but really works well here. Because just, I don't know, I tend to think like, was this just a scheduling thing? It's like, why is this guy in this dimension and this person is in this dimension? But it works really well because where she is sitting is still very kind of like homey and nice.
Yes.
And where he is sitting is a little bit darker. It's not ridiculous. It's not Bubbles in the Prince of Darkness. It's, it's just a little bit more shadowed. And then the fact that that Hitchcock stays with the same framing throughout, in the sense that like they're having this nice conversation. And then when things get a little tense, she starts talking, because she starts mentioning that she overheard his mother.
Right.
Then it like changes the angle, and he gets a little like, he opens up a little bit.
Sometimes when she talks to me like that, I feel I'd like to go up there and curse her and leave her forever. Or at least a fire.
And then when she goes on to say, hey, your mom seems kind of wacko, and I'm just, I'm trying to be nice. And then he turns on her.
Yes.
And he's just like,
people always mean well. They cluck their thick tongues and shake their heads and suggest so very delicately
that it's more of a close-up thing. And then it kind of goes back. That's a nice reflection of the flow of the conversation. And Anthony Perkins is so good.
Oh my gosh.
He's very disarming.
Yes. Yeah, and this is where he's also going, he says the famous lines of, well, everybody goes a little mad sometimes. She starts pressing him, what do you do for fun? Don't you have any friends? And then, of course...
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Even though we've heard that throughout pop culture, those lines are still so effectively creepy when played within the context of the scene, especially with the photography that you're just talking about.
Yeah, and what on... subsequent watching, like coming back to it, because there is still a certain amount of like, okay, well, this is called Psycho,
right? And
like thinking of it from their point of view, because there are certain things where I'm like, just the way film language is now, and just the way that we watch stuff, that if you're like, well, obviously that's what it's going to be. If there are certain things that you can tell, whereas like nothing like this had really happened before. You know? You're like, okay, so she's it's called Psycho, and she's like running away because she committed this crime. But this guy seems kind of nice, and so it's going to be a thing of them trying to get away from stuff because they're going to hook up.
Yeah,
be a romantic pair or something. Because Sam seems nice, but kind of standoffish. No, any of that.
Not at all. He does at this point also talk about the origin of the motel and just that his mother, after the father died, met a new man and encouraged her to invest into a hotel. And that's why they went ahead and built it up. And now it's just like nobody really comes along anymore. And Norman does
they moved
feel
the highway.
Yes, and Norman does feel a little stuck here, but it's because of the actions of his mother that like laid the groundwork for all of this.
Yeah, and it's they talk about sort of personal traps because she's very cagey about what her deal is, but she's talking about how she's trying to escape a trap that she set for herself, and he's like, "Oh, I was born into mine."
Yeah, private traps, I believe.
Yeah, and that we all have them, and it's through this conversation that she basically is like, you know what, I gotta go back. Like I can't handle this. This is just too messy. We see her after they part ways. We see her in the hotel room and she's like subtracting out the amount of money from 40,000 minus 700. Oh, what could that possibly be?
I was going to say, come on, guys.
I got out the calculator. I'm that bad.
I didn't know there was going to be math.
Yeah.
As Chevy Chase says.
But then then she rips it up and throws it in the aforementioned toilet.
Woo!
Just a moment of silence for that. The proud first toilet. By the way, not featured in any Oscar in memoriam.
Whoa. All right. Yeah. Gosh.
So I'm led to believe it's still out there. It's still working. And so, I mean, hopefully it's marching with the strike.
I was going to say.
But yeah, so she starts to have, through a conversation with Norm, she starts to have a change of heart.
Yes.
Then we see, and I like, because this is like the first time the camera's really gone away from her. As we see Norman in his office just kind of futzing around and then kind of has a pause and goes and removes this painting.
Yes.
It's like a painting. I forget what it's called, but it's depicting a rape, basically.
Yes, exactly. Multiple men in the painting, I believe. Yeah.
And he moves it off the wall, and there's a little peephole.
Right.
And he's spying on Marion, who's again in a brassiere, I think.
Yes, or gets into a robe.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, maybe this Norman guy isn't as nice as we thought he was.
Right.
But it's still a very passive act. It's still like much like the audience. This has a lot of ties to, without getting too far into it, to Peeping Tom, which was the
yes
Powell. Which that ruined that guy's career for a while, and Hitchcock didn't have that problem, but. Yeah. A similar kind of thing about like there's a lot of voyeuristic stuff throughout this movie. It like not as overt all the time as him doing that, but I think that the movie is, like I said, with your shifting focus and your shifting alliances, there's a certain amount of like voyeuristic stuff that he's playing with there.
Yeah, I love that over time it goes from Peeping Tom, who his career got ruined, Psycho, Hitchcock pretty well fine. Then you got De Palma, who just like runs with that kind of stuff.
Like,
and
you know what rules? Spying on titties. Woo!
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Totally. So now Marion gets in the shower, gets stabbed, and moving on. Anyway, that's about it, really. No, it's
the end. So don't steal money, kids.
Right. No, we get like arguably the most famous film in cinema history or like in the top 10 that if you have never seen Psycho, you have seen this scene. It took days to shoot, and I mean there's so much interesting shit about this that they made an entire documentary just about this minute and a half long of film.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find so fascinating is that over the years, there are so many unresolved questions about who was responsible for what in this sequence, whether some people contend that Saul Bass directed this. Others people contend, well, Saul Bass did so much great storyboarding that he basically directed the shot, which I think is duh. A storyboarder is not a director, obviously. Then it's did we or did we not see nudity? Did they have to go to the censor board about it? My favorite fun fact about that was just that Hitchcock hired a model and dancer, a woman by the name of Marley Refno, and he hired her to just be basically naked on set all day for several days in a row, just so Janet Leigh would feel less put on the spot, which is weirdly sweet, I find, but
considering like Hitchcock's relationship with women,
okay, maybe sweet
like
was
Tippi Hedren.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, no, like it's weird, but like you're like, okay, I get the concept behind that,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
Same thing where, and I'm sorry, I'm talking about this in the same breath as Psycho, but in Jason Takes Manhattan,
yes,
how in the shower scene, the director Rob Hedden, when the one actress in the shower scene, he was like, no, I'll get naked too to make you feel comfortable.
That's
it's like,
creepy.
Okay,
yeah,
I was like, okay, I understand what's going through your head, but no,
that's not the way to do it, maybe. I'd like to believe. No, you're right. I'd like to believe that Hitchcock's heart was in the correct place, but he's also famously pretty sleazy. So maybe he was just like, oh, double the naked ladies on sets, I suppose.
I can hear him saying that. That's great.
Yes.
I've also heard, because there's like that she was wearing the shapeless moleskin.
Yep.
Because I mean, like, the amount of skin shown in this was very risque,
unprecedented.
A lot of tall tales about this scene. I think probably with it being so iconic, everyone has like, oh well, my uncle who works at Alfred Hitchcock, told me this.
Yes.
But yeah, it's an amazing construction thing. You never see the knife penetrate at all. Mm-hmm. Like, what little blood you see is chocolate sauce, which I always liked that.
Of course.
And in fact, you see more blood after the fact when he's cleaning up versus when the attack is happening.
Exactly.
I had not watched this in a long time, and I have not watched I don't think I've ever seen it on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've only seen like VHS versions of it, or whatever, that you can see when the mother comes to attack in the shower scene. You can see like it's very like dark, which is ridiculous because the bathroom is so bright.
Of course. Yeah.
But for whatever reason, you cannot see her. And it's just, it's again, this uncanniness. It doesn't seem like, well, that's wrong. It just seems like this is this malevolent force.
Sure.
But you can still see a little bit of the whites of the eyes. I never noticed that before.
Yeah.
And that was really disturbing to me.
Absolutely.
And I really love that. Yeah. It's this almost like the thing appearing behind the Winkies in Mulholland Drive. It's
right.
Like,
of course.
Yeah.
So mother comes in and stabs Marion, if that wasn't apparent here. And she falls over. And some of the shots of her towards the end are really upsetting as she's getting stabbed and like falling over the ledge of the bathtub. And then to me, the best shot of the entire sequence is the close up on her face and the pullback of her, like her completely still dead face, which was really unsettling at the end there.
Yeah, the swirling water into the eye. And yeah, again, you could probably just do a whole podcast just about that scene. And it's constructional, but it's still very impressive. Obviously, the template for
everything,
modern slashers and whatever. Yeah, like so much horror has sprung from this movie.
Hitch wanted to get a very specific sound of the knife entering the body, and I just remember from that book, evidently the art department and sound department had to round up a whole bunch of different kinds of melons. And he just went down the row and stabbed melons with a knife, just waiting for the correct sound. And then he decided which one he wanted, and he said in his droll voice the name of that melon, and everybody was like, "Cool, we got our flesh-sounding melon for that sequence."
What was the melon?
I can't remember. I was gonna look it up in the book, but I can't rember the section.
I was hoping it was honeydew.
Yeah, that's the money melon.
That's the money melon.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
Yes.
It's just movie making is so silly. I love it. So this is just this wild shot. You are like 45 minutes into a movie, and this main character, this is Janet Leigh. Like, this isn't just some also ran, like, I mean, even though like I think she's in the credits as and Janet Leigh. Right. So that can be a, like, oh, featuring, but it's also, sure, or like a reverence, like, oh, it's Janet Leigh. Mm-hmm. But to have this, like, all of a sudden, what the hell? She's dead. Well, now what? The mother has left. You see the mother exit the bathroom, and then you hear from the house, the Norman.
Mother! Oh, God! Mother! Blood!
So it's like Norman's like, oh, my God, crap, and runs down and sees it. So you know that, murder's just happened, but then Norman is like freaking out about it, and it's like starting to clean up. How long the cleanup scene happens.
Yes.
It's without audio or like without dialogue or something. It's just him and him reacting. you're immediately kind of on his side a bit.
Absolutely.
Like as soon as, because I figure that because I'm just watching it, and then as soon as a car drives by and you see him like drop the stuff, like, oh crap, you're like, your heart is like, and then and it made me think of, there's a podcast, I think it was the Empire magazine, I want to say, they recorded like an interview with Quentin Tarantino and Edgar Wright during lockdown. And Quentin Tarantino was talking about Joker. And he said, like, seeing it in the theater was amazing because the moment before he shoots Robert De Niro, you could get a sense that the audience wanted it to happen.
Yeah,
that the audience was like on his side. And it's that kind of thing where all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. Like, this guy's just covering up. I was with her, and now you killed, this person's dead, and you're covering up for it. But now I'm on your side. Like, and when he's disposing of the car and it's sinking into the swamp.
That's my favorite bit of it, to be honest.
It's great.
Where he disposes of Marion's body, as well as accidentally the $40,000 that are wrapped up in a newspaper. And I love how inconsequential the money is at this point. This does not matter anymore.
Yeah.
So he pushes the car into a swamp and it doesn't go down, and you get real tense. You're like, no, get down there. And it's like, wait, I'm rooting for disposing of a poor woman's body here. They are a hero. Yeah.
How you're able to manipulate that into happening is fascinating. And just that, like, there have been multiple times in this podcast where we've both talked about in previous movies about like, well, that just did not matter. What was the point of that? What was whatever? Where it's like that red herring is so inconsequential, but it being inconsequential, like, makes it consequential. Like the fact that it's like, you've been following around this whole time, and they're like, nope. Guess what? That doesn't matter anymore. Is the way that's handled is wild. Yeah. And it's very effective.
Especially when you have a whole hour of the movie to go after this.
Because you're like, well, it's not even the money. Like, okay, well, so he's not about him stealing the money. And so even later, when they're starting to get on his trail and they're like, well, it's probably the money. You're like, how dare you? It is not the money.
Right. Norman wants nothing of this.
He's insane. Yeah. Not a jerk.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a kielbasa melon. There you go. It's that kind of melon. I didn't even know what a kielbasa melon was. So I have no idea. Up on melons and melon trivia.
Well, really. Crap. There goes our big melon sponsorship chance.
Exactly.
We could have made this into something.
Yeah. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that he does wrap her in plastic in the shower curtain, of course, and takes her away. Yeah, so he cleans everything up, puts her body in the car goes underneath the swamp, and then we cut back to Marion's sister, Lila, who is arriving to see Sam. We've never seen Lila before. So this is such a jarring scene to me, but it's needed because the last 10, 15 minutes were so tense. And now we're just like, we're in a hardware store. So it's really letting the air out of the balloon in a good way. Like you're allowed to settle.
It's back to reality. Yeah. We're out of Camp Crystal Lake. We're in a safe spot.
Yes. She does report that Marion is missing. And I do love how we are introduced to Arbogast, who just seems to be, unless I missed something, he's just sort of hanging out outside the hardware store, just kind of leering through,
Yeah, because she goes to the hardware store, and you see the scene starts with Sam writing a letter to Marion. Yes. It's basically just like, fuck it, move in. I love you so much. We're going to make this work. And this is a very heartfelt thing, which is much more nice and kind than he is throughout this entire movie.
Sure.
Not that he's a jerk, but he's a little bit of a jerk to Norman. Probably wouldn't have gone down the way it was if he wasn't so pushy. But whatever. I
was going to say, he's still on Norman's side here?
Yeah, when it comes to Sam, yeah.
But, nobody likes a bully.
But she comes to see him to be like, so, yeah, my sister is missing, and maybe I thought, she was going to come see you. And then it just cuts to this big-faced man in a doorway. Just, you find out later he's been following her, and he just aggressively enters the scene, and I love it.
Walks up into this extra close up.
Yeah, just because it's very funny that you're like, okay, well, our main character is gone, and then we've been following Norman, and then okay, now who's this other? What's going on here? And it's excuse me, I'm in this scene now.
Right,
a very impressive entrance.
To completely.
Just be here's my face, get all of it.
He basically says I've been tracking her and I'm on my way up to the he goes door to door to a couple of people, correct? And then they kind of he puts together that she's left and going to the motel.
Because he talks to Lila and Sam. It's kind of like, yeah, she's missing, and I figure, girl with $40,000 probably missing together, probably on the way to see you. Like, I don't know, but you saying you haven't seen her? Well, I'll go check some hotels. Yeah, you get this little montage of him stopping by different flop houses and hotels, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, pulls up to the Bates Motel where Norman is just sitting outside eating some candy corn.
That was an Anthony Perkins note. He's just like, I think I should be eating candy corn. And Hitchcock is just like, whatever. Like he famously just did not like actors. He kind of hated actors because he just found them to be too much to deal with. He did not want a relationship with them. And then, of course, during pre-production, like he had to negotiate salaries, which he was just like, ugh, if I pay this much for like Jimmy Stewart, then people are going to expect something out of him or a certain return. Yeah.
He didn't want people. He wanted little figurines he could move around.
Absolutely. That's exactly how he kind of thought of them.
Yeah. He did not like Sam. He did not like John Gavin as Sam. And it's very different. Apparently, like his performance is a little bit different than what's on the script, but he just like Hitchcock found him like wooden and
I think even Hitchcock has said like, the Sam and Lila stuff is just like the weakest part of the story, which like, I guess, I mean, after you've had the last 25 minutes that we just saw, like, I guess if you wanted to say like, this is where it dips a little. Yeah. But I do like Arbogast. He's fun. Like
all this stuff that you've been experiencing so far, this almost for lack of this sort of terminology gets used a lot, but this sort of like foreplay up until like the orgasmic explosion of the killing. Mm-hmm. And then basically you're kind of hanging out for morbid curiosity.
Sure.
It's like, well, what's going, you're like, okay, so what was that all about? And then, so you're kind of suffering through some of these people. And I still enjoy it.
Yeah.
You could indeed argue it's a little, I like Arbogast way more than I like Lila and Sam.
Sure.
Which I think is smart to kind of like shift over to him for a bit.
Yeah. I just want to watch this guy.
I'd rather watch him. I was never really taken with Sam in this movie.
So Arbogast ends up making his way to Norman, and we get the first in a series of basically sequences where Norman is very, very uncomfortable because people are just sniffing around his place. So the first being here with Arbogast, and like he finally just asks Arbogast to leave and just say like, you just got to come back with a warrant if I'm gonna start talking to you, because everybody wants to talk to Mother. Once they find out that there's an old lady in the house, they just really got to go talk to her.
Yeah, he captures Norman in some lies about who stayed here and when, and finds out that Marion did sign the guest book under an assumed name. Which I like that Norman is still just like throwing the same shtick at Arbogast, like, 12 cabins, 12 vacancies.
Yeah.
He's not used to being questioned by people.
No.
He lives this very solitary lifestyle. And so he's already kind of shaken that that's happened, on top of the fact that he's covering up a murder.
Right.
Yeah. And then as soon as like mom gets brought up, he's like, no, get the fuck out of here.
Exactly. So don't come around here asking about my mom, because that'll be what flips the switch. This is the scene of the aforementioned weird ass shot of him leaning in to look at the book, which is just fantastic. I stopped listening to what Arbogast was saying at that moment because I was so enchanted with that shot.
Because Arbogast, it like shows him pictures like, you don't know this person? He's like, no, I don't think I've ever seen him before. It's like, let me look at your book. Just let me see. And I've got a picture of her handwriting, and it's just this. It's a very heavily shadowed shot of him eating candy corn, and then like he just like cranes his neck out to turn and look at the book, and it's this weird, like it's very vulnerable in a sense because he's exposing his neck to us, but it's also very sort of like predatory, like a raptor turning its head just slightly, and it's at the same time violent but scared. It's
like if you make one sudden move, he might bite your throat out at that moment. Which
is great for how you feel about Norman, because you're like, he's covering up this murder, and I'm kind of want him to get away with it because what I've done before.
Yep.
But at the same time, like, he's bad. And so like, what's going to happen to Arbogast? But I'm afraid for Norman.
Totally.
And just that weird little shot encompasses that. And I love it.
Oh, gosh. Norman finally asks him to leave. And, what always seems to happen was the moment Norman, gets his eyes off of somebody, they just, pull one over on him and basically, go around the back door, essentially. So Arbogast runs up to the house, and you get the beginning of another classic scene where he starts kind of looking around. He starts walking up the steps, and the camera settles into this just like amazing, like God's eye view at the top of the steps.
Yes.
And then out of one of the bedrooms comes Mother rushing right at him, stabs him, and we get this amazing shot of him falling backwards down the stairs. Mother does not keep stabbing. She gets in like 1 or 2 stabs, and then he falls backwards.
And then she descends on him after
Exactly.
he's falling down the stairs. Yeah, it's this post-process shot where they shot the stairs and then put him in a chair in front of it. And then again, it's uncanny.
Yes.
Because like he's not falling, he's just sort of like skating backwards down the stairs. And it's like it just gets in your brain like that this is just weird.
Yeah.
But this was a scene actually talking about the Saul Bass doing some storyboards. Is that according to Hitchcock, this was the only scene that he storyboarded. According to Hitchcock, he got sick, he came out with a temperature, and he was like, hey, cameraman, just do what Saul says. He knows what's up. And they basically, it's a totally fine sequence of events. Like it's a close-up of a foot, it's him going up the stairs. But Hitchcock was like, nope, can't use any of it.
Yes.
Because it felt more like a killer going up the stairs than like a detective.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so I like the way how they ended up doing it,
right?
Because it doesn't seem, it does make it seem like even though Arbogast has been this more, I guess antagonist to Norman, and even though your sympathies are somewhat with Norman, by not having that happen, by not having his approach upwards seem like it lessens his power and makes you a little bit more afraid for him.
Sure.
And again, that the sort of shifting of alliances.
He's vulnerable, but he's also, invading their home, for a good reason, obviously. But, he's vulnerable, but yet he's the aggressor here until Mother comes screaming out of the room. Yeah.
Yeah. Mother always wins.
Right. Yes. And it's worth noting, too, if you've ever seen Fright Night, they completely homage / aped that whole shot of going like getting stabbed and like falling backwards down the stairs. A little bit of an annoying scene here with like Lila and Sam argue over who gets to go after Marion, and of course Sam wins because he's the man, and he arrives at Bates Motel, and he's yelling for Arbogast, and then he goes back, and that's it. It is the funny. The funny truth of life before cell phones, when you had to like drive forever, go look for someone, then turn around, go back. Yep, didn't find him.
He does see a figure in the window.
Yes,
he does see
that's true.
Another mother silhouette.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's an odd shot here of Norman. It's a great shot, but his face is so in shadow that it almost looks for a second like he's back at the swamp because of the background. But I
think he is.
He is back at the swamp. Okay. So, but there's a moment where I just don't understand the geography of like where the swamp is. And it's almost like, it almost implies that he's looking up at the house or he's looking at Sam or something like that. It's still such a beautiful shot.
Yeah. It's never really established where the swamp is.
Exactly.
It's just somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it seems very weird that he's just like within earshot of it. It's like, is it just behind the house?
Right.
Where is it? Because it seemed like you would want to take the car far away from your house. But I also like, and this is just looking back on it with the way that movies are told now, is that Norman's insanity doesn't give him like super criminal powers. He's still kind of a simple guy. Yeah. Much like, I mean, this is, without getting into too much of his backstory, like this is all loosely based on Ed Gein, the serial killer out of Wisconsin, who was a very slow individual. And so not turning him into like, he's this mastermind. Right. He's just this a deeply troubled person just operating in the world. Yeah. And so then after that, they decide to go to the police. And because again, Alfred Hitchcock has said, like, why don't they go to the police? I've always replied, they don't go to the police because it's dull. Yeah, and I love that. It is. Yep. It is. Like I like the performances here. I like the little information that's revealed here. They go to his house like late at night, and he's all in robes, and so's his wife. And they're afraid of. And when they mention his wife, when they mention the like Norman Bates and they mention like a woman. Oh yeah, she just perks up like
Norman took a wife.
He's so excited for him.
It's so cute.
They said it was his mother, and they're just like, what?
Whoa. Yeah, because this is where we get the big ol' shock that
Norman Bates's mother has been dead and buried in Green Lawn Cemetery for the past 10 years.
I helped Norman pick out the dress she was buried in.
this is where we get the backstory of the fact that she killed her lover that encouraged her to create the motel.
Yeah,
And-
murder-suicide with
Yep,
strychnine.
Strychnine. And, Sam is just like, but I saw a woman. And so they say, like, well, who's buried out there at the cemetery? Which is kind of a fun red herring if you think about it for a second. Because at this point in the movie, you still believe that there's a mother, going on. And you've seen her, you've heard her, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So for a split second, I was like, who is buried out there in the cemetery? Like, is there like another body? Or like, are they going to go dig it up? Whatever. But that,
You know who it is?
Who?
It's John Kramer, Jigsaw himself.
There you go. Yes.
Because we never found out where his body was after Jigsaw.
Yeah.
So it's just as likely there.
Yes. This time there's a trap.
A personal trap. Yeah.
There is. Right. Yes.
This movie predicted Saw as part of the Sawniverse.
At this point, yes, and it is important to know that Norman found them in bed together, dead at that point. So,
Which does make you wonder, like, when it happens. Because they talk about, like, that he was pretty young.
yeah,
What happened to him afterwards? Where has he been?
right.
I don't know if that Bates Motel show goes into that, because I know that's about him. I don't know if I'll be able to watch that show, because I found out that little goofball from The Good Doctor plays Norman Bates, Freddie Highmore. And I don't know if you've ever seen any clips from The Good Doctor. It is ridiculous. And so I have a hard time taking him seriously.
Freddie
but
Highmore.
We'll see.
Yeah, I thought about checking out a few of those episodes just for the heck of it, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to say her name. Vera Farmiga. Farmiga.
Yeah.
I like her a lot,
Absolutely.
despite not knowing how to say her name. So I mean, I've heard decent enough things, but it's not going to be this.
Yeah. Norman walks upstairs and we hear Mother again saying she won't hide in the fruit cellar. And of course, I can't help but think of Evil Dead every time I hear the word fruit cellar. Who's in my fruit cellar over and over again. I'd like to believe that's Sam Raimi homaging Hitchcock. But this shot is so incredible because it's one of those long uninterrupted shots that just kind of cranes from the ground floor up into looking into the bedroom, coming back around, and we see back to that God's eye view, bird's eye view, whatever you call it, similar to the stabbing of Arbogast. It sounds like a fantasy novel. The stabbing of Arbogast. Yes.
I'd read it. Yeah.
So we get this great shot of Norman carrying Mother out of Mother's bedroom and scurrying downstairs to take her to the fruit cellar. She looks like, she's unable to walk, so he literally has to pick her up and carry her.
This is what I was referring to earlier, where Hitchcock's talking about the reason he did this is like he didn't want to cut when he carries down to a high shot, because if like he didn't want to give the audience any reason to suspect something was weird there. Same thing with the Arbogast stuff, where it's like he didn't want to have just you just see her from the back, because why are you just showing her from the back? But that's a weirder angle. So he had this hanging camera follow Perkins up the stairs, goes in the room, continued going up, but he has the conversation, the argument happened to kind of distract you from like just killing time as the camera gets into place, because you're focused a little bit more on that. But the camera kind of hanging around and looming feels uncomfortable as well, because it's no longer, it's getting to a place where it shouldn't be, like your kind of point of view seems odd. But I do think it is, it's distracting enough that you don't think that you don't see how he's deceiving you by not showing you Mother exactly.
Right. And because we've seen this angle before, we've seen Mother and this angle before. So it's like an established angle and an established vocabulary of the film.
Yeah, and if you wanted to be
strange.
Like some kind of pretentious jerk about it, you could talk about that sort of like the overhead view being sort of like the authoritarian Mother view of like this sort of God's eye thing over everything, and that's how you see Mother is the position that she views Norman.
Here's another kind of like boring sequence with the policeman and his wife, but I did like the whole scene is worth it just for me. For the wife says,
"It's Sunday. Come on over to the house and do your reporting around dinner time. It'll make it nicer."
Because she just wants to serve this nice young couple a Sunday evening dinner, and we can talk about your potentially murdered sister, and it'll just make everything go down a little bit sweeter. So that's some Midwestern hospitality for you right there.
But and again, the fact that like what seemingly would be like things that would help move the plot along or whatever. The sheriff's whole investigation, don't worry about it. You don't need to see it.
Yeah.
He'll just tell you because it's boring. He'll just tell you, yeah, I didn't find anything. And that's totally fine. You're not going, well, that's something I really wish I would have seen.
For sure. Yeah, let's get on with it. Get on with it, they do, because Sam and Lila go right to the motel. Bates tries to keep them from looking at the book. There's a lot of tension here with their back and forth. There's a fun bit of, please give me the receipt. They really want to like draw this out and get as much like little detail, try to again catch Norman in some sort of a misdirect.
Yeah, Sam is very aggressive here.
Yes. And this is where you don't like Sam.
This is where I don't like Sam. Just because
he's bullying.
Well, it's just like I think you probably could have gotten away with it if you weren't as pushy. I think it's like it's that just like he's a dumb guy. That's what he does. Like he's just like the only way out is through. Like just Tom Osborne, run up the middle. Nebraska football fans know what I'm talking about. Yeah, because
I went right to Spider-Man. And I was like, I know there's Osborns in Spider-Man. That's a little bit more John Speed.
Yeah, no, Nebraska football. That's the only thing I know about Nebraska football. But like he's really pushy because like any little step up Norman has, it's like, well, no, normally a hotel would have you do this. Normally a hotel would have you do that. Like it's not just this like, oh, are we not going to do? It's not this more like kind of friendly whatever. It's just he's really trying to. I mean, it's effective. It catches Norman off guard because he's not used to being talked to, let alone being aggressively talked to by anyone other than his mother. That ends up becoming a cover for Lila to go investigate the house because they go into a cabin. They check out the other cabins and they find cabin 1. That's where they find the unflushed note. Again, salute to the toilet. Prove she was here. I'm going to go, she goes to check the house. Sam's like, I'll go keep him busy. And it's like, oh, my wife is trying to sleep and I can't sit still. So I'm going to come in here and just be a jerk to you. And Norman's like, oh, okay, sounds fine.
Right. Resume.
And so we get intercuts of their conversation with her exploring the house.
She finds mother's room and finds the bed, like what word is this? How would you say? It's like a depression in the bed.
There's like an indentation in the bed where clearly like someone is just laying there constantly.
Yeah. Depression in the bed. Sounds like Saturday mornings to me, right?
Yeah. Which we just had to move recently due to some ongoing, like some floor repairs that we had to have done in the house. And when they moved the mattress out, there was totally just like my side of the bed is like, it's like, gotta flip that mattress.
There you go. It's like a bigger version of Homer's ass groove.
Basically,
he really wanted it back in the couch. She drifts around to different rooms up there, and I believe eventually she does find, Norman's room, and there's like this like creepy little like felt bunny rabbit that he sleeps with, and there's some books that she takes a gander at, and a lot of it seems to be like fairly inconsequential. However, you just do see how like Norman lives.
And it's very, very sad. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, so it's not like Ed Gein's house where he had, skin lamps and cases full of painted up vulvas, and his mother's room was actually like boarded up. You weren't allowed. I got very obsessed with serial killers in college, like him and the real weirdos, like him and Albert Fish, something like that. But it's like it's still a home. It's just frozen in time in this very sad way.
This is obviously where Mother's body was before Norman scooped her up and carried her down to the fruit cellar. So Sam is interrogating Norman, bullying him. He's getting increasingly agitated. He manages to knock Sam out and run up to the house. And he runs up to the upper level while Lila was beginning to find her way down into the fruit cellar. Like, so they miss each other on the kind of medium level there. She makes it down to the fruit cellar. She she sees Mother sitting there in a rocking chair, and she tries to like grab her by the shoulder and turn her around, but we get this magnificent reveal of Mother's mummified body close up on her skull face there. And that's still so effective. It's still so scary and weird.
It's just the eye sockets really creep me out. Yeah.
it's such a 1-2 punch too, because just as you're coming to realize, like, my God, mother is a mummified corpse, what does all this mean? Norman comes in dressed in her dress with a wig on, with this absolute maniacal look on his face that I started to compare to the final shot of Sleepaway Camp in my head a little bit.
Sure.
Of that giant wide-eyed face.
The weird grin.
Yes. Yeah. And he's ready to come running at Lila. Sam appears just in time to wrestle the blade away. And we go down in a heap.
Well, he doesn't even like wrestle the blade. He just like stops his hand and like kind of like starts pulling the dress off Norman, who's wearing his regular clothes underneath, but like the wig comes off and like he's done.
Yes.
Like this collision that just happened in his mind is just destroyed him.
Right.
And it's fascinating to watch Perkins do it.
Yes.
Because it isn't just that like, oh, you stopped my plans, you found me out. It's that's there too, but it's also that the mother persona that we come to learn about in the next exposition dump and the Norm persona are in the same place at the same time, and they can't possibly be in that body at the same. It's just he's wiped out. Yeah,
and there's a sense of relief too, like an agonizing relief. I think, where he's just like, yeah, I'm done with this finally. You know, he's not happy about it, but he's really distraught. But there is a sense of relief there, I think.
Well, it's because he's done. As we learn, like Norman is gone now. It's just Mother.
So, yeah, we get into this scene, and like, again, far be it from me to criticize Alfred Hitchcock, but there's something about this scene that I've never quite liked, because it's just like a solid 4 or 5 minutes, well acted. Like, I like watching the guy do it, but he just kind of explains everything. And maybe that was more necessary in the 60s. That could very well be explaining the psychosis of Norman and in two brains living, or two identities living within one mind and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I again, like I keep bringing up all these like much worse movies to talk about this, but it made me think of Dreamscape.
Wow, I wasn't. Yeah, okay.
Where's just so much of Dreamscape is spent going, okay, you're going to go in these people's dreams, and here's the thing: you're going to go into their dreams, and you're going to go into their dreams,
right.
And where it's just like,
let's get to the dreams.
Like, I get it.
Yeah,
I understand this, but like. This is such a wild concept. No one's going to get it. Whereas this is like, we're out here. We're just out there with what we're trying to sell people here. So we really got to explain it to them.
Yeah.
It does have this kind of like Greek chorus sort of thing.
Sure.
Of like, or, you know, like this other character coming out and being like, well, here's how this all wrapped up. Or it made me think a little bit. There's a Kurosawa movie called The Bad Sleep Well. And there's a spoiler alert. There's a part where like the main character dies off screen and someone else just comes up and is like, oh yeah, no, he died, but this happened and then this happened. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it is this weird wrap up of like someone almost coming out and explaining the moral of the movie to you.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's a different time. So having someone like say this stuff, you're like, what? Because he's outlining how like, well, no, Norman's mother told me, Norma told me. And, you know, Norman would dress up like his mother. He's a transvestite. No.
Yep.
It wasn't anything gross like that.
Yes.
He just would murder people.
Totally.
No, it was that like there's no sexual thrill to it. It's just like he would be his mother. And then just revealing that Norman is the one that killed his mother and her lover. But also just like throws the whole character of the mother into like confusion, because the psychologist does say that she was this very overbearing person, and they were each other's world. And then she met this other guy, and Norman felt jealous, whatever. But then in Norman's head, he invented her being as jealous as he was, to try to like cover up for, you know, he just couldn't handle that he killed her. So he made up this persona and whatever. But then also like, because he was as jealous as her, it'd only be natural she would be as jealous as him.
Yes.
So some of that like overbearing ridiculousness is just amplified by Norman making it up. So it's even weirder. It's not just that like, oh, his overbearing mother made him this way. It's like, well, his overbearing mother combined with his own creation of his overbearing mother.
Yeah.
It's just like this you've just uncovered all these onion layers of this guy. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah.
You know?
and you know, similar to Marion driving in the car, imagining people being angry at her, you know, Norman is imagining his mother being extremely angry at him, and just kind of cycling in on that, throwing gas on the fire, and with combating jealousy. So like anytime Norman started like fancying a woman or something like that, this fake but constructed idea of his mother was jealous of that and killed her.
And then you get this revelation that's not ever touched on before or even like alluded to, where the psychologist is like,
have you any unsolved missing persons cases on your books?
Yes, 2.
Young girls?
Did he confess to...
Like I said, the mother.
He's been at this. Like, so it makes it even worse. It's not just this moment of, we all go a little mad sometimes, something happened that, oh no, he's been at this for a little bit.
Oh, you think we could squeeze 3 seasons of a television show out of that?
I bet.
Probably.
I bet we could.
Yeah, I bet that's what they do. Yeah.
It's wild. Like, just all this exposition is done at the end. And I do think, I think it's just with all the groundbreaking that's happening in this in terms of like seeing a toilet.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't stop talking about that. But just like, here's these insane concepts.
Yeah.
These bonkers concepts you've never dealt with before. I feel like we got to hold your hand through it.
Maybe that is true. Yeah, it's just, maybe it is just when this came out, and knowing,
but it does feel a bit clunky now.
Yeah, and knowing that the audience was extremely shocked all through this film.
Yeah,
and maybe this is like the come down that they needed at the time. And again, Hitchcock can decide what's best for his film. I'm not going to fight him on that. But it feels, maybe it's just weird in a modern context. Whereas,
it does feel a little anticlimactic to just be like, and this is why he did it.
Yep.
The end.
The end. Although the end is a pretty great sequence where I was just like, oh, cops are nice in the 60s. Norman was cold.
It's like, can I bring him a blanket?
Yeah, give Norman a blankie. And he wraps it in, and there's the very famous push-in on his face, smiling right into the camera, kind of like Marion did while driving the car. And Mother's voiceover starts coming back, describing...
It's sad when a mother has to speak the words that condemn her own son. But I couldn't allow them to believe that I would commit murder. Yeah,
it was all Norman, like, I wouldn't hurt a fly. I'm nice. I'm like, look, there's a fly crawling on me now. I'm not going to swat it because they'll know. Like, they're watching probably right now.
Right.
And then then the camera fades from Norman smiling at the camera to the car being pulled up. But in between, there's the shot of the mother's mummified face superimposed over, which it's very subtle. I thought very effective.
Yeah.
And just also just that, like, the reminder of her car is like, oh yeah, I got wrapped up in this other stuff that, like, it just felt like another movie I was watching.
Sure.
Like, oh, that movie.
Yeah.
It kind of, this weird, like, back to reality of dredging her up.
Yeah.
And thank God getting that $40,000 back for that rich guy.
Yeah.
Which was the big concern.
Yeah. Yeah. The psychiatrist does say something to the effect of kind of offhandedly, because someone asked, like, well, what about the money? It's like, this was a crime of passion, not a crime of money. And it's like, oh, yeah, that.
I am fascinated to see where they go from here.
I mean,
because again, like, Alfred Hitchcock didn't be like, well, this is going to be book 1 of the Bates Chronicles.
Right.
He just made this movie. And so, like, I am fascinated as to, right now, my immediate answer is money. Is the, like, cynical, like, well, let's just bring this back. I'm curious why they made a second one.
Right.
And, like, how they're going to tell that story, because the idea of because it didn't happen till the 80s, I believe,
right? Like 83 or so. And I think it's important to remember that Hitchcock died in 1980. So I bet that well, in the 70s wasn't exactly the time of sequels, but by 83 you've got the slasher boom is even starting to, like, kind of wind down. And so I'm sure they were just like, well, Hitchcock is dead, so he's not going to stop us from bringing back, the mother of all slashers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, is 2 going to be just like Brooks Hatlin in The Shawshank Redemption, of him just, like, getting out and being like, I don't know how to live like this.
Could very well be.
And it's weird to talk about Psycho in that framing of, like, well, this is part 1 of this series, but for our purposes, it is.
Yep.
And it is still it's a standalone, fantastic piece of cinema. Highly recommend everyone watch it.
Absolutely. For closing thoughts, let's honor our dead. Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh. stabbed in the shower by Norman. Detective Milton Arbogast, played by Martin Balsam, stabbed by Norman on the stairs. And the end. So yeah, great movie. Still, if you've listened to this and haven't watched it or haven't watched it recently, man, like I can't suggest highly enough just going back and just make sure you know Psycho. I think that's important.
I'm not trying being like a return guy and the only ways are better, but just like this is a very simple, effective movie. Like it's complex in its like its themes and its construction, whatever, but like it's a simple story told very well.
Yeah.
Compared to modern standards,
right?
Anyway, and again, coming off of the convolution of the Saw movies, I'm not even sure that's a word. That's how twisted up they got me. It was nice.
Yes,
it was very nice to just come to this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's just a fantastic picture.
Yeah. It's one of those like I really wish I could see this for the first time again.
Yeah.
I would love to have my brain wiped of Psycho, sit down in a theater and watch this. Especially, I mean, God, if I could do it in 1960, like just the shock of seeing, especially the shower scene would be amazing. I mean, I'll tell you right now, fire up the birds and just give that. I mean, that's my favorite. I know that's easy, but it's definitely his most horror. Arguably more horror than this, I think. But because I always associate it more with like the thrillers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
And but already, like speaking of that, this does kind of set me up to. I'm really fascinated to get to the Gus Van Sant remake too.
I very much
because already I'm like, well, Vince Vaughn's the wrong choice.
Yeah,
but like. I'm fascinated by just all of it. Like why?
Yeah.
There's just like how it's done, whatever. So I'm really looking forward to getting to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is just a pretty. There's a reason it has the reputation it does, and so to just remake it shot for shot is an endeavor that I'm also like I don't not in a way that I'm like writing it off.
Yeah.
Like I'm fascinated to see what's going on here and what I can kind of glean from that. But. And I'm, like I said, I'm real curious about where we go from here.
Oh my gosh.
In the story of Norman Bates.
2, 3, and 4. And from what I know, they're fairly well regarded too among horror fans, but not many people seem to watch them. So I'm stoked. Yeah. All right. Well, that is Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. Before we get out of here, John, what's going on at John and Alex Hate Stuff?
John Say Stuff. We just watched, speaking of horror stuff, we just watched Megan
with
Regan.
Mm-hmm.
And then up next, we're going to watch Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh.
Just something fun to watch and talk about. So we're going to do that.
Nice.
Why don't you tell us what's going on Please Leave?
Oh, yes. And on Please Leave, if you like short horror fiction stories, check out Please Leave podcast. We just posted our 50th short story. These are done by voice actors with sound effects and that kind of stuff. And yeah, we just posted our 50th one. And my third or fourth one that I wrote one about my grandfather's life working at NASA and some potential extraterrestrial going on, which is based on a lot of reality, to be perfectly honest. But Courtney Eck writes the vast majority of them. I just throw in some here and there. So I felt bad about taking the 50th slot, but that's just how it kind of worked out. So check those out. Please Leave podcast.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. I actually just listened to, I don't know why I've been holding it off, because I think I was going to record a Patreon thing for John Hate Stuff. Like I just listened to your Skinamarink episode where your little sort of Patreon, just fun chat about Skinamarink. Mm-hmm. I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But absolutely check that out. It's a fun time. And on also, like, I think maybe it was Chumps Love Insta point us. Like we've had 50 episodes technically.
Wow. 50 episodes.
Because I think we've already hit it because with our interview with David Weiner and then like episode 0. Mm-hmm. And then I think, we had the bonus episode with the full interview with Greg Bagoni.
Yep.
So, we've had 50.
Hey,
so
we've
thanks
had
for
50.
if you've been hanging around this whole time, thank you so much. If you're just joining us, I hope you enjoy. Also, a big shout out to Sicko Gina, which I should probably stop calling her that because she's very nice.
Yes.
Wrote us a very lovely email talking about how much the Saw series of films like meant to her experience watching them, something like that. Really appreciate you reaching out and talking about it, because we love to hear from people, whether you agree with us or not, what you think of these movies and your takes on them. Because I'm fascinated, like in this Saw stuff, I don't think we loved it as much as Gina did, but I could absolutely see why she's into it.
Yeah. For sure.
But thank you so much for reaching out, and thank you so much for listening.
Absolutely. Yeah. And feel free to write us with whatever you'd like at thismayhurtabit@gmail.com. And if we get enough interest in this, we could just do like a little mailbag at the end of some episodes. So if you want to just write us in with questions, or what should I be watching this Halloween season, or something like that, we can.
Or what should we cover next?
Exactly. Yeah. We can do like a little mailbag wrap up if there's enough like that. Ask John what games he's playing. Ask me what horror novels I'm reading. I don't know. That kind of stuff.
Because I don't read books. That's it. Right. I want to make that known now.
Exactly. Unless they're for the podcast.
Unless they're for the podcast.
Right.
Unless I have to do homework.
Right. Yes. But anyway, yes. Thanks again. Thanks for everybody for reaching out. Thanks for, if you just found us through Saw, definitely thanks for sticking around through Psycho. I'm always a little bit worried off people who are just like, I'm not that into Psycho. I'm not going to keep listening. Yeah. But thanks for sticking around for all of our franchises. And
if you don't like Psycho, we'll get to some much worse stuff coming up.
Yeah. So, just give us like five episodes on this, and we'll get back to like
right back into Ice Cream Man or something.
Yeah, or House or something like that for sure.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, everyone do your homework. Watch Psycho 2, because I bet you've never seen it. And join us next time as we discuss what happens to Norman Bates in 1983. Good night.
Good night.
This has been a Two Penguins Media production. It was produced by James Strayer and edited by John C. Myers. Logo by Ethan Kimberling and music by Michael Arthur Holloway, who you can find on Bandcamp. Follow us on Instagram at thismayhurtabitpod and on Twitter at hurtabit. Email us at thismayhurtabit@gmail.com. And if you are so inclined, rate and review us on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you next time.